Good afternoon. Today I'm talking to Tony Forder. Hiya, Tony. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us why you've come to chat today?
Yes, so I am Tony Forder, you're right. Well spotted. And thank you for inviting me onto your show. Good job you got the right person. And I'm looking forward to this. Today I'm here because I've republished my 2 Mike Lynch books, which I happen to have here. These are ones I made earlier. So, Screen Blue Murder, can you see that?
Yep.
Followed by Cold Winter Sun. So these 2 books were originally published by Bloodhound, and I got my rights back to them in December, and had a bit of a think about whether to republish them because they're very, very different books. But there were a couple of reasons why I decided to go ahead, and you know, I'm really glad I did because it means a lot to me, especially having, well, for 2 reasons. Screen Blue Murder, I know a lot of people know this already because I've mentioned it before, but I originally started writing it for my dad because he was a real advocate of action adventure novels. You know, when I was a kid growing up, they were all around the house. And I read them, and I was really interested in them, but I'd never written anything like that. So when he was having a bit of a slump in his reading, I thought, oh, I'll write him one, you know, in that kind of naive way that you do. And I got about a third of the way into it, and I really couldn't figure out what I was going to do with the rest of it. And then kind of, you know, life takes a hold and things get in the way. You know, sadly, he never got to read it, but I eventually finished it and dedicated it to him. And I like to think that he would have enjoyed it. But I suppose about 80% of the way through, I thought, you know what, I really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed writing these characters, writing in a different style, especially because Mike Lynch, who's kind of the reluctant hero, is written in first person. And that was a new thing for me too, because, you know, giving me a totally different insight into character. So I really enjoyed that, and I thought I'm going to do another one. My publisher didn't really want me to, but I decided I was going to anyway. And the follow-up is called Cold Winter Sun, and although it's not quite the same, it's still action adventure, but it's got some of my favorite lines and certainly 2 of my favorite characters in it. And it largely takes place in New Mexico. And my 2 favorite characters, apart from the main ones, is an old sheriff called Sheriff Crozier, who, you know, he's really kind of laid back and folksy, you know, in the way he talks and the way he thinks. And I really enjoyed writing him. And the other was a Native American called Joe Kane. And I loved his scenes as well. And I loved the way they kind of bumped up against each other throughout the book. So, yeah, I just loved writing both those books. And I've been thinking a lot lately about finishing the series off with a 3rd book, which I have started, and which I kind of go back to every now and then. And every time I get a little bit of a slot, I'm going to do a bit more. So I do hope to have a 3rd book in the future.
Awesome. That's brilliant news. So you wrote those before you started the Bliss series, didn't you?
I started writing Screen Blue Murder before. Actually, I actually wrote Bad to the Bone first. Well, I wrote The Degrees of Darkness and then Bad to the Bone. They're the order in which I actually wrote the books. But I sat on them for ages, didn't do anything with them. So I started writing Screen Blue Murder before both of those were published. But then they were published first. And Screen Blue Murder was my 3rd book, I think. So, yeah, across 2017 and 2018 they came out. And as I say, they didn't do very particularly well. It's not to say that they bombed, but they didn't do brilliantly, which is kind of why I haven't returned to them since. But I kind of want to wrap it up. I've always wanted to do a third book, and I feel there's one more story in it. And I've known the story for ages that I wanted to write, but it's just finding time. You know, and there's other books that I want to write and other books other people want me to write. So yeah, I will do a third one, definitely.
Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about both?
Well, yeah. I mean, the star of it, I suppose, as I mentioned before, is Mike Lynch. And he is a reluctant hero. He's having a really bad day when his day gets a lot worse. He witnesses a roadside murder. And he's taking a leak at the time. That's a rather delicate way of saying he's having a piss. But he can't see the incident. He hears something happening in the lay-by where he's parked his own car. Well, when he comes over the top of this mound and he sees a man lying on the floor and another man holding a gun, and then the guy shoots at him as well. So he makes a dash for it, but he can't make his own car. So he jumps into the victim's car and he speeds off in that, and there's a chase. But when he gets away and he's in the dark and he's all silent, he suddenly realizes there's a young woman and a young girl lying in the footwell behind him. And that kind of sets off a whole passage of ups and downs and highs and lows and various battles. And he's kind of chased across much of England by a various bunch of people, including the police, the National Crime Agency, some gangsters, and even some rather dubious people who are very well armed. And so, yeah, it really is a kind of, you know, shoot 'em up, blow 'em up kind of action adventure. And it's not I suppose it's not one of those thrillers in the truest sense. It's more kind of a ripping yarn. It's just something to lose your mind in and just enjoy it for what it is. It has no pretenses to be anything other than what it is. And it's just a story. And a lot of people said it's probably my most visual story, that they could imagine it on film. Because that's how I wrote it. It was kind of everything was visualized in my head. And I tend to do that anyway, but this one even more so, especially all the action. The second one begins when Mike is sort of recovering from the things that happen in the first book. And his wife is living in LA with his daughter and her new husband. And he gets a call from her just to say that she's a bit worried about her husband's nephew, who's been away and hasn't returned. And his 2-week absence is unexplained. And the police and the FBI aren't really very interested. And she's really asking him what to do, but he thinks she's really asking him can you resolve this for me? So, he jumps on a plane with along with his best friend, Terry Cochran, who joined him halfway through the first book. And together they fly out to America and they end up in New Mexico. And again, they encounter this whole array of characters. There's a couple of hoodlums from Reno who they pose as detectives, but they're a little bit strange duo. And I love Terry and Mike's first contact with them, because it turns into a fight that made me roar with laughter because of the things that happen in it. And then there's a couple of FBI agents and there's the sheriff and the Native American that I mentioned earlier. And it all takes place in this area of New Mexico, which I researched amazingly, because I was only looking up a few places. And one of the things that hooked into my head was the Roswell incident, which was the supposed UFO crash back in the 1940s. And when I started researching that, I thought, oh, I love this. I've got to include a bit of this. I hadn't intended to. And the more I read, the more I realized that it should never have been called the Roswell incident. It should have been called the Corona incident. And I don't mean either the virus or the beer. Let me be straight about that. But actually, the UFO crashed about 75 miles outside of Roswell. And the nearest town was this tiny little place called Corona. And legend has it that the guy who discovered the wreckage actually bought a couple of pieces into Corona to show people. And they were the first people to tell him he ought to take them to the police, who then took them to the United States Air Force. And I just read about it and just thought, this has nothing to do with my story. But it was such a fascinating thing that I kind of included it, because I decided to set things in and around Corona and in and around the crash site. So I ended up including a load of stuff that I hadn't intended to, but only about 10% of what I researched, because otherwise the book would have been about 4 times as long, you know, and it would have been a conspiracy within a conspiracy. And, you know, in the end, I ended up cutting quite a bit of the book anyway, just to speed up the pace. Because when I kind of told it more of a storyteller rather than this is a book. So I was kind of wandering off on tangents all over the place because of these characters. The more I wrote the characters, the more I wanted to write about them. So I just did more of them. And in the end, you know, I had to cut back. So it's actually turned out to be the leanest book I've ever written. It's only about 85,000 words. So compared to my usual 120,000, it's quite lean. But yeah, it turned out to be one of my, I actually realized just only recently, it's turned out to be one of my favorites, just because of the characters, you know. So yeah, that's those 2 books.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite as well. And I think I messaged you after I read it, didn't I, to ask if you were interested in like aliens and all that stuff, because it was such a big theme in the book.
It is, yeah. I mean, I wanted it to be a bigger thing, because once I got into it, I thought, is there any way that I can, you know, make this part of the puzzle? You know, because I just wanted to write more about it and have it part of the action and part of the puzzle. But in the end, I really thought, no, this has been done to death, frankly. So I made it a more minor part. But for me, it was a really interesting part. And it was an interesting diversion, because they still go on, you know, they still go on to the land where the UFO crashed, and they still go into Corona. So, you know, there's bits of it that I've included just by virtue of where they go, which has allowed me to kind of express a few things about the incident itself, you know. So, yeah, I was glad of that, even though I'd love to have put more in.
If you did do a third, do you think you'd enjoy writing them as much? Could you get back into the characters, even though it's been a while?
Well, because I've had a bit of downtime recently, because I finished the book I was writing and I didn't want to edit it yet. And I hadn't started a new book. So I had a little bit of downtime. So I went back to it. I read the first 3 chapters that I wrote last year, and I added a 4th. And when I looked at it, yeah, it did take me a little bit of time to get back into seeing things through Michael Lynch's head. Because, you know, I mean, obviously Bliss is always there, and the new characters that I've just written about and the new book that I've been working on were in my mind. So I had to get rid of them and bring Mike Lynch back in. So I kind of read a little bit of the two books, just to find Mike Lynch's voice again and how I'd written him and the perspective, etc. So I wrote a fourth chapter just to sort of prove that I could. And yeah, I enjoyed it, and I kind of know where this book is going to go, and I know what I want to happen in it, and you know, I'll kind of tie everything off, because I you know, I think it's the third and final book once it's out there.
So there's no chance of another series carrying on from there. Then it will be 3, and that's it.
That's my intention, yeah. I love writing them, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you know, because they don't sell brilliantly, it's kind of, it's, I don't know, it's, you know, it's got to be something that I just want to do in the bits of time that I've got, and just compile the book and put it out there just so that it's finished, so I can say there's a trilogy and that's it, you know, and people either like them or they don't like them, they buy them or they don't buy them. It's kind of, you know, I've made 2 available, I will write a third, and yeah, I'll be pleased to have them out there, because I've written 13 books now, one's yet to be edited, but I've written, you know, the 12 books published, and those 2 books, the Mike Lynch books, are the most fun I've had writing, because I've just been able to really let go and just let my imagination spill over, and not worry too much about writing the perfect lines, but in not worrying about them, I found myself fascinated by them, because I've written in a very different way. And you know, I was skimming through Cold Winter Sun the other day when the book arrived, just to make sure that they were in good nick. And I just found myself sort of reading some of the passages and thinking, oh yeah, I really enjoyed writing that bit. And I found myself laughing and sort of thinking, oh yeah, I really enjoyed writing that bit, you know. just little bits of stupidity. And, you know, there's the fight I mentioned earlier, you know, Terry Cochran is a very, you know, he's a martial arts person, and he does things all in the right way. Whereas Mike, he just stands there and kicks someone in the balls, you know, and I found that hysterical. Especially the descriptions of the way people felt after being hit by these 2, you know. So I just, because it was a different location as well, and I loved describing New Mexico, the different parts of New Mexico, you know. And I was fascinated when I did my research. It hadn't even occurred to me that it might snow in New Mexico, but it does. Yeah. So I put some snow in it. Yeah, while you're in New Mexico, you might as well throw some snow down.
I think Terry is one of my favourite sort of partners, I guess, just because they're so different and their relationship is hilarious.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the first book, they hadn't seen each other for a while, but for reasons I can't go into because it will spoil it, Terry's long felt he owes a debt to Mike. So Mike doesn't want to call him into this problem, but he can't figure a way out of the situation he's got himself into, and he needs his friend's help. And yeah, I mean, Terry is the kind of bloke who, you know, will drop everything, you know, in order to help a friend. And you know, Mike Lynch starts out actually, and deliberately so, a character you don't immediately warm to. He's a bit whingy and a bit whiny, and he's a bit, you know, he'd rather be doing anything other than this, getting himself out of this situation. But hopefully by the end of the book, his kind of true colours come through, and, you know, you find that he's really an honourable person who's trying to do the right thing in extraordinary circumstances. And yeah, and then really Terry in the second book comes into his own because of what he does and the professional that he is. And yeah, he's the silent partner most of the time, but when he has something to say, it counts, you know. So yeah, and I love their relationship, I really do.
Yeah, it shows.
Well, I think that's why, because I enjoyed writing it so much, I think that's why I enjoyed reading it as well. I mean, I've never read any of my books, you know, not in full, other than, you know, when I've been writing them. So I've never read them as a book, as a reader. But I must say, as you know, reading those passages the other day, I just kept thinking how much I'd enjoyed writing them and how much I was enjoying reading them, which is unusual for me. So yeah, it was. I was glad I'd written them. I was glad I've republished them, and I'm glad I've decided to write a third, because I want to finish their stories.
Me too, on all counts.
Well, and you know, again, it's I know there are certain people who have enjoyed the book who will read it, you know, a third book, and will be glad to have a third book out there. But like everything else, you know, it's got to work for me as well. And this book I really want to write now. I've dithered over it for a while because there's been other things, and I've been busy and I've had lots to do. And they say you shouldn't go back, but I just thought, no, I've got to go back to this. So it kind of, if I'd left it at 1, I could probably have left it there. But having written 2, I feel as though the whole story is not finished. You know, there's only 2/3 of a whole story done.
And would you say to people that are fans of Bliss that they would still enjoy those two, even though they're so different?
Well, I'd love to say yes, because then hopefully every Bliss reader would go and buy the book. But the truth is, very much, I don't know. There have been, you know, in some of the comments, in some of the reviews, some Bliss readers have said, you know, that this wasn't for them. They loved Bliss, but this just wasn't for them. Because it's very different. It's a very different style of writing. It's a very different pace, and they're very different people. They're very character driven. But there's a lot of action, and there's not huge amounts of backstory, which a lot of people like, books that don't have a lot of backstory. And certainly there isn't much in these. You know, these are, you get a little bit so that you know the backgrounds of people, but otherwise it's just full on from page 1. It doesn't let up till the final page, really. You know, it's just non-stop. There's something always going on, or there's something about the characters that, you know, will draw you through the plot, you know, hopefully. Anyway, that's the intention. But yeah, I don't know if Bliss readers, I mean, I'm not the best judge. I mean, as you know, I had no idea that Sidney Mallow from 15 Coffins would be such a popular character. That was a huge surprise to me. So I've got no idea what those who don't know Mike Lynch will think of him. I really don't. They might like the characters better than they like the books. You know, it's just, it's people are people, and they'll like what they like. And you know, my hope is that you know, more people will get to read them than did the first time around, because they kind of languished a little bit towards the end, and then they were out of circulation. They've been out of circulation since November. So having them back out there is just kind of nice to say that they're done. They look nice, and you know, would I recommend them? Yes, I would, because I loved writing them. You know, for no other reason than I thoroughly enjoyed myself writing these books. So, and I know for a few people, you know, there's a couple of people who read them last year, towards the end, when I sort of said, if you want to read them, you better get in quick because they're going to be gone soon, who, thoroughly enjoyed them and, really do want a third book out there. So, yeah, I'm pleased to say that that will eventually get there, though I have no idea when.
Such a tease. I mean, I'm one of them people that once I read Bliss, I want to read everything that you've written. So do you think other people seeing it as your name might just pick them up anyway?
Well, I don't know. It'd be probably a bit arrogant to say they would. I suspect it'll be a bit of both. I suspect some people will read them, but only if they've read other books as well. Because I think there are Bliss readers, and I think there are my readers. So I think there are some people who like Bliss who haven't particularly liked the other books. And that's fair enough, because, it's not as though when I write something else, I'm kind of still writing the same stuff. My other books are very different from each other, and very different from Bliss. So there's a rhythm to your writing. And so there's a rhythm to the Bliss books. And once you get into the Bliss books, that rhythm becomes more familiar, and you become probably more interested in the people and more interested in the character development, as well as the stories. Whereas going into a completely different arena, a completely different setting with completely different characters, even though I've written them, isn't always something that someone will enjoy. And I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't expect people to enjoy something just because I've written it. I'd never expect that.
Fair enough. I can't think of any more questions about those two, unless there's anything you think I haven't asked you that you want to tell us.
No, not about those two.
You want to tell us about the Autumn Tree?
Because as I said to you earlier, before we started the interview, it's not like they're new books. This is not a proper publication day. This is republication day. So it's, I'm not treating it the same, and I'm not as excited, but I'm just pleased they're out there, and I hope people enjoy them if they buy them. So, I'm happy to talk about other things.
Good stuff. I can't even remember what I've asked you before. That's the trouble.
Well, if you ask me the same question, maybe I'll have a different answer, and then we'd be in trouble.
I know, and a lot of people watch your ones as well, so they'll be like, "It didn't say that last time."
Yeah, I've got to try and think of what I said, just in case I implicate myself.
I think I've asked you before if you'd like to be a character in a Bliss book. So if you were in the Mike Lynch books, who would you like to be? And if either of the books, would you rather be in those?
Oh, blimey. I mean, I'm really tempted to say I'd love to be Mike Lynch, because he experiences all those things. But, I mentioned him a bit earlier, and even though he's only a lesser character, a bit part player, Sheriff Crozier is one of my favorite characters that I've written. I just love his laid back, laconic style. He's a folksy character, and I can imagine he's really fun to be with, sharing a beer, So even though he's not the most aggressive, up-to-date kind of person, he's nearing retirement, being, Lincoln County Sheriff. There's just something about him, and I think, if I was, I'd quite like to be him. But of course, we all also want to be sort of men of action, don't we? So I suppose, there's a little bit of Mike Lynch, or maybe even Terry, that I'd like to be. But if you held me down to one, it would be Sheriff Crozier. Just, I suppose, because he's old and crotchety like me.
No, you're not. You're fine.
Certainly not a man of action.
If you were in a situation that Mike finds himself in the first book, would you handle it? How would you handle it, actually?
Oh, I'd do everything that he did. No, I
You're
wouldn't.
such a liar.
I'd probably break down in tears and wet myself. It's one of those situations, I suppose, where unless it happens, you wouldn't know. We all like to think of ourselves as doing the right thing and acting responsibly, but I suspect I'd be a little bit like Mike was at the beginning, a bit extremely reluctant and a bit grudging and sort of thinking, why has this happened to me? Even though it's, someone else was shot and 2 other people are in trouble, it's all about him. So I suspect I'd be a bit like that. Thinking, oh, that's it. You people ruined my day. Yeah, I don't think I'd be the reluctant part of reluctant hero.
Hopefully the chances of that happening where you live are quite slim.
Yeah, well, you never know.
That's true. Your new series, if you set it somewhere different, did I read that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it may not yet be a new series, but certainly the first book in what I hope will be a new series is set in Wiltshire. And I wanted to go somewhere else, somewhere completely different, for one thing. And also because I know the area quite well and I've got family there, it makes for a nice place to go and do a bit of research. Although the book's written, I'll still do a bit of research. Just nice pubs. But yeah, it's I've just started editing it this week, and I'm loath to say, but I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm usually really bad at going through that first edit after the first draft. But I'm kind of thinking I wrote this in a different way and I kind of slowed myself down while I was writing it, because, when I'm writing Bliss, for instance, it's very easy to write quickly because the characters are so firmly embedded in my head and their next moves, they're predictable to me. But these characters, their moves aren't predictable to me because they're new. So I slowed everything down. And I've deliberately kind of used kind of shorter chapters. And I'm finding I'm not really adding much to them as I go through. I mean, I'm making changes, certainly, but I'm not adding much to them, which I think is good, is unusual for me. So it's a new experience, and new characters. For me, the thing about this one is the story. I absolutely love the story. I mean, it's a horrible story, don't get me wrong, but it's one that I would want to tell, even if I end up not using these characters to tell it for some reason. For me, I've got to like characters by the time I'm done. So when I'm finished this first edit, I'll reach the point where I'll either say, okay, I'm going to persevere, or I'm going to dump it. Because, the best of storylines won't work without the characters working. They've got to gel. They've got to be able to take the story through. That's how I see it anyway. Because I'm character driven when I'm writing. I've always thought that characters can overcome a weaker story, but I don't think it works the other way around. So yeah, I'm hopeful at this stage. I'm not going to commit myself to anything, but I'm hopeful because I kind of reached the end of the first draft and I thought to myself, this really might work. So that, I mean, I don't really know what I'm going to do with it either. at the end. Because if I like it and I pursue it and I finish the whole thing, then I'm going to have to sit back and decide whether I'm going to perhaps send this one off to a different publisher or publish it myself. But that'll entirely depend on how I regard the end result, I think. And yeah, and I shall be spending the next probably couple of months editing that. So that'll be, I mean, I've got a week when in May when the Autumn Tree comes out, sort of, a week either side where I'll be busy doing other things. But otherwise, I'll be editing this book for the next couple of weeks, and hopefully, I'll know sort of come the summer how that's going to work out. But yeah, definitely fingers crossed.
Sounds exciting. So good stuff.
I hope so. You can never tell, but I think my usual readers will like it. I think so. So the question is, can I entice new readers on board? That's always the question.
Have you read that since we last spoke?
Have I
read much?
I'm currently going through a lot of autobiographies. I've read a few. I've read a few books, and I've bought even more. I mean, I'm just looking over to my right where I've been trying to sort out my bookshelves, and I've got boxes of books lying around, and I've probably got about, I don't know, 50 or 60 paperbacks sitting here that I've not read. And it's worrying because I know I'm never going to read them all. But yeah, I've been reading a lot of autobiographies, mainly musicians. And I've thoroughly enjoyed them, although I have to say, every one of them seems to have experienced the same cycle of lifestyle, where they have a great time getting into a band and starting a band. Then they get into the whole drink and drugs and rock and roll thing. Then their marriages fall apart. Then they end up, trying to get sober and clean. And then they're about 40 or 50 before they realise that their previous 30 years they've flushed down the toilet, which is a shame, but they're all the same. I've just finished reading Phil Collins, and I hadn't realised, how much bad stuff he'd done to himself down the years. I mean, he was a real drugs and drink man, and he's open about it and ruined relationships left, right, and centre. But I think that's fairly common in musicians who travel the world for a living.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed them because it's a break for me from fiction. So that's a good escape for me.
Post lockdown, you have one concert to go to, one country to visit, and then one other event of your choosing. What are you going to do?
Well, concert-wise, I don't know. My favourite band split up in 2019. Two of them have formed an offshoot. I would still call themselves by the band name because they're both originals. Well, one of them is an original, and they're doing a summer tour, but it's in Europe. And they're actually, it looks as though they're actually going to be able to do it. But whenever they did it, that would be the first place I'd go and see them, because one of them is my favourite musician of all time. So, yeah, I'd certainly go and see that as a concert. What was the other one? Country. I don't know. That's a weird one because, if I was much younger, I'd want to go to Japan. There's parts of Japan that I would love to see. The places which are still how I picture the old Japan, in samurai days and things like that. I'd love to go and see those. But, there's no way I can really travel too far these days. So I'd have to do it within reason. But I guess I'd probably, I'd probably go over to America and see my mum again. So that might be one thing. What was the other one? An event?
Yeah, of your choosing.
An event of my choosing. Well, probably, unless they get stuffed, I'd go and see Chelsea in the cup final. But who knows how that's going to turn out, So, I haven't been to Wembley in a while, so it'd be nice to go to a cup final again.
Yeah.
Even though I'm pretty pissed off with football these days, but a cup final is still a cup final, and for us old timers, it still means something.
Luton beat Watford the other day. That's all I care about. That's our everything. So I don't care what else happens now. We beat them, and that's my season made.
Is that Luton's local derby?
Yep.
Yeah.
We hate them and have hated them for a long time.
Well, quite right too.
Yeah. They're second as well, so we've done quite well to beat them, I think.
Well, it's always. I mean, as I say, I've been pretty cheesed off with football for quite a while now, but your club is your club, and I've been a Chelsea fan now since 1966. So you can't kind of just turn that off, Yeah, I mentioned this before, and I figured out if you love your football and you love your club, it's the longest love you have in your whole life. So so it still means something to me when they do well, but I've gone off the game. So
today with their announcement about this Super League, and then Mourinho's been sacked as well. For God's sake.
My club are part of that Super League, and so today I hang my head in shame along with most fans, because I think it's one of the reasons why I don't like football anymore, and this is just another extension of it.
Yeah. What about the Euros? They're supposed to be this summer, aren't they? Hopefully, if they go ahead. You're an England fan.
Yeah, well, I kind of am and I'm not. I prefer rugby. I prefer watching England play rugby than football. Although I must say I'm more interested in this particular team than I have been for a while, because it's got quite a few younger players coming through. And I do, I think even though they're not the magicians they're made out to be by English press, because frankly, if we have a player who can control the ball and pass it, they're treated as, gods. But I do like quite a few of the youngsters who have come through from different teams. So it might actually be worth watching just to see their progress, So I'm not overly impressed with all of them, but I think it's just nice to see a new generation of players who seem to be able to play the game and have fairly level heads on their shoulders too. When they're interviewed, they come across as if they're grounded,
Yeah, I must admit I'm quite looking forward to it. I mean, I think we were one of the favourites going in before the lockdown happened, which is quite scary. I don't think that's been the case for quite a few years. So
well, I think we're partially one of the favourites because some of the other teams have been so shite. Yeah. I mean, the Germans. I have no idea what's happened to Germany, but they're just bloody awful at the moment. The Belgians aren't quite what they were, and neither are the Spanish. So, I mean, Italy are not too bad at the moment, and France are probably the real favourites, I would say. But yeah, I think we'll, if it depends. I mean, we're capable of giving them all a decent game, but we do tend to fold when we're playing decent opposition. So yeah, I'm not overly hopeful. I'm a practical England supporter.
Do you hang flags out on your house?
You know, the last time I was ever really that up for it was, you know, when we were only celebrating 30 years of Hurt back in 1996, was it? Or yeah, yeah, we were, and it's been a long bloody time since then. So it'd be nice to win something.
Yeah, that song's a bit depressing now. It's 50 odd years, isn't it?
Yeah, you go from 30, and then it was 40, and then 50, and now we're approaching 60, and it's becoming a joke.
Yeah, it's not a funny one.
Not a funny one, no. But yeah, I mean, it's a distraction for me, you know. I mean, I always loved my sport when I was younger, played a lot of it. But it's a distraction that I can, you know, enjoy, because I'm finding it sort of difficult to switch off these days with TV and films and stuff like that. So sport is one thing where I can often turn my mind off for, you know, 90 minutes to 100 minutes at least. And you know, because I don't take any of it really too seriously.
I'm pretty sure you were sulking when England lost in the rugby.
Well, I wasn't sulking, I was annoyed. I don't sulk these days. I used to be a real sulker with sport. You know, if Chelsea lost, which they used to do quite a lot, you know, I'd sulk for a week. But yeah, I was really hard work after a defeat, which made me pretty much hard work all year round. But these days, you know, I'm a bit sanguine about it. You know, it's one of those things. I don't get upset about defeats, but I get angry about them in the way they come about sometimes. Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah, I'm always sitting on the sidelines because I can always play better and manage better than anyone actually out there doing it. You know?
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. All armchair fans can, can't they?
So, yeah, I wanted to say to you about, we were talking earlier about the autumn tree. And I just wanted to know, we were talking about covers as well. And I just wondered whether you liked the new cover.
Yes, I do. It's cool. Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, not that I've read it yet, but it's for the title.
This is why I was going to mention it, because I think with some of my new covers, the covers really make sense once you've read it. And this one in particular will make much more sense once people have read it. So yeah, I've kind of got engrossed in covers since I went on my own, because I'm putting much more thought into them. So when I speak to my cover designer, I've always got a clear idea of what I'd like to see, and then she interprets all my stupid thoughts and puts out what I really meant to say. You know, so, yeah, I'm really pleased with that one as well. So, and I'm starting to get nervous about it already. Yeah.
Whereas we're all dying to read it.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of really nervous, because you get that way when, you know, you've had your beta readers and you know what they thought and you know what you think, and then you sit there and you think, oh, but is everyone going to go, oh no, sorry Tony, but this one's shite, you know, move on. You just don't know. You have a gut feeling. Most of my gut feelings going into the book are usually people won't like it, and then they do. So this time I'm going in, unfortunately, thinking I think people are going to like it, which might mean the opposite, you know. So I'm really anxious. I'm really starting to get edgy about it. And I'm trying to focus on other things rather than think about it. But at the same time, you know, with the cover going about and the arc coming up and being sent out to bloggers and it, you know, having to start thinking about publication, it's all, you know, I can't push it to one side too much.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that even though we were talking about it before, Tony wouldn't tell me anything. He told me that he wasn't talking about it anymore. So if anyone thinks I know anything, I don't.
No, you don't. There's only 4 people who know about it, and they're keeping stum. So, yeah. Yeah, at the moment it's kind of, I mean, I remember saying that this was going to be a less busy year. Well, it's going to be a less busy half year because it's been fairly manic this first few months. We're putting degrees out, and then these 2 Mike Lynch books, getting The Autumn Tree ready and writing the other new book. It's been really busy, but I've got really nothing planned after the summer. So it's time to, at the end of May, when The Autumn Tree's out and I'm close to finishing my edits for the other new one, I'll probably reach the point where I've got to sit back, probably over the summer while I have a break, and think about what comes next. Because I'm not quite sure where I'm going after these next couple of things. So,
will our reaction determine some of that? Like, if we demand another Bliss book, does that mean you'll do another Bliss book?
Wait now, see, you're trying to tease something out of me there, aren't you?
To me, that's hurtful. That is, as if.
Yeah, I'm not going to commit myself in terms of anything at this moment, because I'm not going to give anything away. I do think, yeah, it'll be slightly contentious. I don't think everyone's going to be happy. But that's as far as I'm going. So,
the Bliss sets will come en masse if you do anything to Bliss or Penny. You do realise that, don't you?
They're going to go full Annie Wilkes on me, aren't they?
Absolutely. Too bloody right we are.
I mean, the way I think about it is, whenever Bliss toddles off, whenever, there's always his past cases to go back to. And as I also mentioned, as discussed in our group the other day, there's a possibility of moving on with Penny Chandler. So, but I'm not saying anything about this. You're not getting it out of me. You will see when you get the arc next week, later this week.
That's fine. I can wait. I'm not impatient. It's like I've been waiting 9 months or anything. It's fine.
It's a really long time, isn't it? It feels like a long.
Yes, it is. It's ages.
Well, it really isn't, because I mean, the biggies, the big boys who publish, boys, men and women, I should say, boys and girls. There's a year between their books. So.
But that's not you, and that's not Bliss, and I want Bliss, so I don't care about that. I want it.
Well, he'll be along soon.
And when is the new one out?
The new what?
Bliss. I know, but other people might not know.
The new Bliss is out on the 24th of May. It is called The Autumn Tree, and not everyone's going to agree, but personally, I think it's my best. That's my personal opinion. But then, as we've already proved, because I think one of my favorite books is Cold Winter Sun, not everybody agrees with me. Not everybody enjoys it, and not everybody has read it. So we'll have to see. You never know. I don't know what the reaction will be, but I'm hoping it's good. Even if not everybody agrees it's the best, I hope they think it's up there, because it's what we all strive for, is to achieve some kind of consistency, really. Yeah.
And we're talking again before it's out as well, aren't we?
We're talking
about The Autumn Tree before it's released in May. On the 21st, I think.
Oh, yeah, the week before, yeah. Is it the week? I'm not sure of the date. I think it's the week before, because, I'm doing something. I'm doing something for a UK crime book club that evening, even though it's got nothing to do with the book, actually. I'm sure I'll be asked about it, but it's actually to do a review of 15 Coffins. But it'd be nice to talk about the lead up to the Autumn Tree, I think, just prior to its release, because by then it will be in pre-order. I think it will go pre-order around about this time next week, probably. So yeah, but I'm kind of loath to talk about it too much because I'm just, yeah, I'm, you know how I get prior to a book release. And I get really on edge and I get really antsy about it. And, I think that, and it's a bit like Chicken Little thinking the sky's going to crash in on me.
You'll have most of your ARC reviews back by then, though, so you'll have a rough idea, I think, of the general feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I was very much encouraged by the beta views, but then they do see it in its raw form, fairly raw form anyway. But I was really encouraged because I was kind of, as I told you before, I'm a bit daunted if I quite like it. That kind of makes me think there must be something wrong. But they were, all of them were very helpful and insightful in the different things that they came up with. And so, yeah, it's just slightly different to how they've all read it, but mostly the same. So, yeah, but those early ARC reviews, not that they get posted up necessarily, because they can't get posted up immediately, obviously. Not on Amazon. I suppose they can be on Goodreads. But I'm a bit wary of them too. I'm a bit wary of not just whether they like them, but what people might give away. So I'm a little bit wary of that. So I'm hoping people will go by what I said about the ARCs and think about spoilers.
Your group's fine. I think you're fine.
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain they are. I mean, there's a few newbies, as you know, came in this week, but I'm sure everyone is going to be fine. And I'm sure if I see something that kind of pulls me up short, I can convince them to change it. Not their opinion of it, but just if they give something away that I'd rather they didn't.
If not, then the Blissettes will sort them out. It's fine.
Well, yeah, there is always the Blissettes to call in. I mean, I don't exactly know. I mean, I think it's a bit of a closed membership, this Blissettes. I'm not quite sure who the members are. And you keep blaming me for the ritual when people join. I've never done anything. I've never done anything. Look, this is me saying now, never did a thing.
But you are going to say that. You're not going to admit to it, are you?
Nasty, vicious rumour. And there is no one locked in my basement.
At the moment, only because you got rid of them last week.
Oh, there's a vacancy.
Don't look at me. I've got a degree to finish.
I'll supply some tools for you. I'll supply a pen and a pencil.
Oh, thanks.
And a rubber.
Too kind. I'll send Maggie your way first. Although I think she might keep you on your toes more than I would.
I think Maggie would be the death of me.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to her.
When have you got her on?
The 4th of May, I think. 4th or 6th.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. She's a character.
I know, I see that. She has no filter either.
Thing is, no, she doesn't. Not much of a filter. And she and I tend to agree on an awful lot of things. But we met at a publisher's do a couple of years back, and I spent much of the evening talking to her, but had no recollection of her accent until I saw her in another interview. And then she comes out sounding like a right carrot cruncher. I mean, I don't know what went wrong. I don't know if she was putting on a posh voice the first night we met, but yeah. Well, I thought that can't be the same person. She's talking completely differently. So she might have two sides to her character. So try and eke the second one out of her.
If anyone can, then I can. So that's fine. Challenge accepted.
I'm sure you'll do just fine.
Well, I don't think I have any more questions for you.
Well, in that case, I'll bugger off. Yes, of course, I'm not just going to bugger off.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, obviously, I just want to thank you for entertaining me again, and for having me on and allowing me to speak about all kinds of crap. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I hope your new website and your new interests go really well.
Thank you very much. Me too. Do you want to show your books again as you've got them to hand?
I will. Screen Blue Murder, featuring the delightful Mike Lynch, and Cold Winter Sun, featuring a vast array of characters, and one of which is the New Mexican desert. So, yeah, I thank you for promoting them for me. But I've enjoyed speaking to you again, and I've enjoyed getting them out there again. And I'm looking forward to the next chat already.
Me too. Thank you very much.